Greetings, fellow cultivators. Welcome to Autonova. Remember to like and subscribe to support the journey. Now, let's dive into the next chapter of A Will Eternal. After that, he made another attempt to use the key. However, nothing happened, no matter what he did. No sort of teleportation effect occurred. Bai Xiaochun's face fell, and his heart began to pound. No way. Don't tell me it will only work that one time. Immediately fretting about the implications, he tried a few more tests. When they all failed, his guts began to twist with regret. Over and over again, he nervously tried to get the key to activate, all to no avail. The command medallion now seemed completely useless and unresponsive. He spent an entire day and night scowling on the verge of tears, and filled with regret. As dawn approached, he was about ready to give up. Sighing defiantly, he performed one more test, which was when his face lit up. After the passage of a whole day, he was now able to sense the same fluctuations he had sensed with the original teleportation. However, he decided to be more cautious this time. Retracting his divine sense, he began to study the medallion a bit more. A few days later, he was certain he had come to understand the medallion as best he could. Apparently, the medallion could only be used once per day, at roughly the same time each day. If an opportunity was missed to activate the teleportation, the only option would be to wait for another day. Apparently, the command medallion wasn't powerful in and of itself, and needed to recharge by absorbing energy from its surroundings. Only once per day? That's not really enough. He sighed, but then pursed his lips to suppress his laughter as he realized that if he wanted to take more trips to the fan in a given day, he could probably just perform a spirit enhancement on the medallion. Sadly, after performing a few test enhancements, he didn't notice any significant changes to the medallion. Eventually, he decided to give up on the idea. If once it is, then once it shall be. Sighing, he focused his thoughts on entering the damaged fan, and instantly, his vision began to swim. When it became clear, he was yet again on the fan. The void outside of the damaged fan was pitch black, with the only light visible coming from the fan itself. Although it wasn't very bright, it was plenty for a celestial like Bai Xiaochun to see. Clenching his hands into fists, he took a breath, stilled his excitement, and examined his surroundings closely. Then he cautiously proceeded toward the same fan rib as he had before. As soon as he stepped onto the fan rib, the fan flared with bright light, as did the command medallion in his hand. As soon as that light shone on him, he lost the ability to move, and felt himself yet again having an out-of-body experience as he flew into the world inside the fan. He could even see what lay at the very far end of the fan, after all of the 100 levels. Shockingly, there was a stone platform, upon which was a gold-colored jade slip. It shone with boundless, holy light that instantly attracted Bai Xiaochun's attention. As soon as he examined it more closely, he was as shocked as if his mind had been struck by lightning. Inscribed on the surface of the jade slip was a line of characters. Tao essence of life and death. Bai Xiaochun had never seen these particular words before, but for some reason, he understood their implication. In fact, as soon as he looked at the jade sip, the voice of an ancient consciousness spoke into his mind. I am the only sovereign from the immortal world. But the immortal world has perished, and the dome of the heavens has gone dark. By the joss flame of my world, I leave this fan behind as my legacy. Anyone who is connected to it by destiny may learn of that which existed in the immortal world, the Tao essence of life and death. Shaken, Bai Xiaochun immediately attempted to peruse the contents of the jade slip, but unfortunately, it was all a blur. And any attempt to make closer contact with the fan itself resulted in a powerful force of repulsion pushing him away. It was almost like a dream. Shivering, he opened his eyes, and realized that he was still standing in the same place as before on the fan rib, and that only a moment had passed. However, after peering off toward the end of the fan rib, he realized that what he had seen was no illusion. After the 100th level, the legacy really was the Tao essence of life and death. I can only get it if I become the true owner of this fan, huh? At that point, determination flashed in his eyes. I wonder if the levels will be the same as before. As it turned out, the first level was exactly as he remembered it. Eyes glittering, he proceeded on, and found that it was the same with the second, third and fourth. It took no time at all to reach the 20th level. Nothing posed even the slightest obstacle. These 20 levels couldn't even be considered a challenge. Soon, he was back on the fan rib, with the 21st level in front of him. At this point, his expression turned serious. He knew that the power he had gained earlier had been equivalent to the first 20 levels. Therefore, everything after this point would be a true test of skill. Thankfully I don't have anyone to compete with, so I don't have to worry about the time limit. With such thoughts on his mind, he decided not to immediately enter the next level. Instead, he searched all of the previous levels to make sure there were no rewards that had gone unclaimed by previous challengers. After placing such rewards into his bag of holding, he felt very pleased. This way, even if I have to go back home without completely succeeding, this journey will have been worth it. With his preparations complete, he looked around calmly. But then, an expression of hesitation appeared on his face as he thought back to the spirit automaton he had squared off against in the past, and wondered if it was awake now. After thinking about it for a bit, he gritted his teeth and strode forward into the 21st level. Almost immediately, the thunderous sound of a roaring wind filled his ears. Everything went blurry, and when things became clear, he was in a world of ice. The sky was gray, and the lands that stretched out in all directions were white. A whimpering wind blew snowflakes everywhere. Perhaps this place had once been a sea that ended up being frozen. There were no mountains or valleys, only a wide, flat plain. The frigid chi was incredible, to the point where even Bai Xiaochun shivered. And that was with him being a celestial with an incredibly powerful fleshly body. Despite that, it felt like he was being stabbed all over, and he even wondered if the flame of his life force was going to be frozen. Any other ordinary cultivator would have been unable to take this level of cold. It's freezing here, he thought. Looking around, he tested to see if the power he had over the fan could help him here, but absolutely nothing happened. Even as he sighed regretfully, his expression flickered, and he backed up a few paces. As he did, a hole opened up in the ice ahead of him, and a fish flew out of it in his general direction. It moved with blinding speed, brushing against his arm as it flew past. Strangely, it looked almost exactly like an arrow. Despite the level of his cultivation base, if he hadn't reacted quickly enough, he would likely have been stabbed through by the arrowfish. Things weren't over yet. His face continued to flicker with shock as more holes opened up around him. In the blink of an eye, numerous arrowfish were all flying toward him at incredible speed. They were silver, and really did look like arrows as they flew through the air with incredible speed. Bai Xiaochun could tell that he absolutely had to dodge out of their way, and that if they touched him, it would have catastrophic consequences. They moved so quickly it was almost like teleportation. And it only took moments until there were so many of them he couldn't count them, a host of glittering silver fish that was shocking to behold. What kind of fish are these? Bai Xiaochun's eyes went wide, and despite the fact that he was on an ice plain, sweat broke out all over him. Back and forth he dodged as the air was ripped to shreds by the flying fish, who all seemed dead set on poking him full of holes. It was almost like Bai Xiaochun was a huge target, and the arrowfish were countless arrows trying to hit it. No matter how he dodged or how fast he went, they kept coming toward him in full madness. If it were a short-term thing, it wouldn't have been a problem. But after dodging fish for the time it takes an incense stick to burn, it was to his shock that he realized the fish weren't slowing down at all. In fact, it was at that point that he heard loud cracking sounds, which came from large portions of the ice plain collapsing, revealing even more arrowfish than before. Damn it, he gasped, why is this 21st level so hard? He had no choice but to keep trying to dodge. Soon an hour had passed. Then 2 hours. Then 6 hours. Bai Xiaochun was beyond stunned. He distinctly remembered that the trials had a time limit of 2 hours, but by this point, more than half a day had gone by. And yet, there seemed to be no end in sight. From a distance, it almost looked like he was in a world of arrowfish, filled with silvery light that reflected the sun in dazzling fashion. Bai Xiaochun really wanted to cry. Suddenly, he recalled the heavenly dragonfish, and wondered if perhaps this was happening because he had eaten too many of them. He continued to dodge the fish non-stop for another few hours. After an entire day passed without him being able to leave the level, he was starting to feel like he was going crazy. Something strange is going on here. Something very strange. Meanwhile, high in the sky above Bai Xiaochun, invisible to him even if he had looked up, was a boy. He was good-looking, and might have seemed charming if it weren't for the cold smile he wore. He seemed very pleased with himself as he hovered there with hands clasped behind his back, staring down at Bai Xiaochun dancing around like a monkey. I thought this brazen thief had left for good, and was a bit disappointed. And yet, he dared to return. HMMMPHH. Well, I might have been powerless in the first 20 levels, but from here on out, I'll make sure you know the meaning of despair. Looking a bit excited, the boy waved his hand, causing ripples to flow through the ice plain. Moments later, 10 times as many arrowfish as before appeared. Heaven and earth trembled under the storm of fish. Bai Xiaochun was scowling on the verge of tears, and was considering just teleporting out of the level. However, he wasn't quite willing to give up just yet. At one point, he got distracted, and one of the arrowfish pierced through his arm, causing unimaginable pain and provoking a miserable shriek. Damn it, I didn't want to resort to cheating, but you're forcing my hand. Moonflower, baby, I need you. Flying backward, he tapped his bag of holding, causing a thick stem to fly out. It only took half a breath of time for the stem to grow larger and larger, with a huge moonflower on top of it. A howl rippled out from within the moonflower, and all of its petals shivered as if in anticipation. Apparently, whether it was the ice plane or the arrowfish, the moonflower considered them all to be food it could only find in its dreams. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased by this. Moonflower, destroy this place, he shouted. At this point, he really couldn't think of any other way to deal with the 21st level other than to place his hopes in the moonflower. The truth was that not even Ghost Mother was very sure about where the moonflower originally came from. After all, the battleship where Bai Xiaochun had found it was only a temporary dwelling place. In the blink of an eye, the moonflower grew to an enormous size. However, it only took a moment for the countless arrowfish in the area to stab through it so many times that it exploded. It didn't even seem to fight back. The resulting bits dropped down onto the ice, and then sank down into the water beneath. The entire scene left Bai Xiaochun stunned. No way, you were so strong before, Moonflower, baby. Crestfallen, he began to back up, and at the same time, decided that he might as well concede defeat. As far as he could tell, not even a cultivator in the great circle of the celestial realm could possibly pass this level. After all, his fleshly body power was essentially unparalleled among celestials, and yet, these fish could actually pierce it. There was little need to mention other celestials. However, just when he was about to throw in the towel, his eyes suddenly lit up. All of the fragments of the giant moonflower that had fallen down into the ice and the water began to bloom. It happened with indescribable speed. Within moments, the entire ice plain was covered with moonflowers and then began to melt. If that were all there were to it, it might not be a big deal. But the moonflowers in the water began to send stems out, creating something like a huge net that prevented the arrowfish from flying out. There were simply too many of the moonflowers. They filled the entire world, growing and growing with every moment that passed. Soon, the ice plain was completely melted, and the water was almost completely full of moonflowers. As the net widened and grew denser, more and more fish were unable to fly out of the water. Essentially, the water below was being completely sealed. And yet, things weren't over. After the water was sealed tight, the moonflowers began to absorb all of the frigid qi in the area. Although the ice plain was gone, there was plenty of frigid qi in the water, as well as in the arrowfish. It was almost as if there were a huge furnace underneath the water, causing it to grow hotter. As for the arrowfish, they were completely flabbergasted. Soon, Bai Xiaochun's eyes were as wide as saucers, as were the eyes of the boy up in the air. In a very short period of the time, not a single fish was able to fly out of the water. Eventually, nothing was left of the water, not even water vapor. The arrowfish were completely powerless. By this point, the 21st level was reaching the point of being a desert. Moonflower, baby, you really are awesome. Bai Xiaochun was so excited he was almost dancing with joy. High up in the air, the boy's eyes were on the verge of exploding, and his heart trembled on the verge of collapse. What had seemingly been the perfect scenario had all been wrecked by a legendary immortal moonvine. An immortal moonvine, he exclaimed to himself. How is this even possible? Even in the days of the immortal world, immortal moonvines were virtually extinct. According to the legends, they were very picky when it came to bonding with a master. They would only choose people who were pure and honest. Damn it. How could this shameless cheater qualify to bond with an immortal moonvine? Despite how much it frustrated the boy, there was nothing he could do other than watch the 21st level turn into a scorching desert. And there was nothing he could do to prevent Bai Xiaochun from simply passing the level. Upon watching the excited Bai Xiaochun fade away from the level along with his moonflower, the boy nearly burst into tears. Damn that shameless cheater. I hereby swear an oath that I won't let you succeed. You'll never become the successor of the sovereign. A person like you would only stain the glory of the immortal world. And I would never, ever, ever acknowledge a person like you as my lord and master. You're the most shameless person I've ever encountered in my entire life. Next time I awake, I'll definitely destroy you. I swear it. Of course, the boy was none other than the damaged fan's spirit automaton. After swearing his oath, he ground his teeth as he faded away and went back to sleep. Naturally, Bai Xiaochun couldn't hear the oath sworn by the boy, nor had he seen him in the 21st level. However, he was very suspicious of how things had gone. I wonder if that spirit automaton changed the difficulty level on me? Although he had his suspicions, he was pleased to have passed the level. It's hard to say. The spirit automaton can't stay awake for very long. I'll wait a bit and then try another level, and see how hard it is. That should answer the question. Having reached the conclusion that this was definitely the best idea, he sent out a thought and vanished from within the damaged fan. When he reappeared, he was in the north of the second immortal domain, back in the eternal lands. 3 months passed in which he mostly cultivated via breathing exercises, but also spent some time going out to check on things in Mystique Prefecture. By now, it was very clear that, under the leadership of the giant Ghost King and Grand Heaven Master, the prefecture was making rapid progress. It was also obvious that Mystique Prefecture was becoming more popular in the region. People from the Heavenspan realm showed up on almost a daily basis. Furthermore, just as the Grand Heaven Master had planned, they began to promote Mystique Prefecture as the best place to get spirit enhancements. Even now, it was possible to see that it would eventually be known as the Prefecture of Spirit Enhancements. As Mystique Prefecture developed, many merchants from the second immortal domain began to do business there. As a result, the booming prosperity of the prefecture was clear for all to see. Bai Xiaochun was very pleased with it all, and was aware that none of it would have been possible without the hard work of the giant Ghost King and Grand Heaven Master. If he didn't have them helping him, especially the Grand Heaven Master with his profound administrative skills, things would have been a complete mess. Also during the 3 months that passed, Bai Xiaochun would occasionally challenge the trials in the damaged fan. Soon, his previous speculations were confirmed. After the 21st level, he quickly passed 6 levels in a row. Although they were difficult, they all seemed to conform to the same general rule systems, unlike the 21st. The 21st had been a maddening fluke. Sometimes, he would fail to pass a level immediately, but after challenging it a few times, would figure out the specific rules governing the level, and would pass it easily. That seemed to prove that something suspicious had been going on earlier. It was definitely that spirit automaton making mischief. It'll just never be satisfied, will it? After that, he was much more careful when challenging the trials. Another month passed, and he reached the 29th level. After that much time without any increase in the level of difficulty, he breathed a sigh of relief. As Mystique Prefecture continued to grow and develop, Bai Xiaochun encountered another problem. Manpower. Mystique Prefecture's population was simply too low, and there weren't enough people from the Heavenspan realm to perform spirit enhancements. Because of that, the Grand Heaven Master's plan was not being carried out as quickly as it could have been. Bai Xiaochun had an idea about what to do. In the following days, he didn't spend much time working on the challenges in the damaged fan. Instead, he spent some time discussing the matter with the frigid matriarch in the Greatsword of the North. Back when he had initially summoned the Greatsword of the North back in the climactic battle with Taoist Heavenspan, all of the people in the North had been sucked into the sword. Of course, most of the Northerners had already been mobilized to fight in the war, but there were still more people inside the sword than were currently in Mystique Prefecture. If those people could be brought out and added to the population of Mystique Prefecture, then development would advance by leaps and bounds. Excited, Bai Xiaochun spent a lot of time talking with the frigid matriarch about the subject. A month later, when his cultivation base reached the peak of the early celestial realm thanks to his gains made in the damaged fan, an agreement was finally reached. The frigid matriarch approved of the level of his cultivation base, and although she didn't say it openly, Bai Xiaochun could sense that his control of the Greatsword of the North was now different than before. Specifically, he could sense that a mere thought on his part could bring all of the northern cultivators out of the sword and into his presence. After performing some initial tests, he excitedly summoned the Grand Heaven Master and Giant Ghost King. Together, they went to a wide, mountainous valley within Mystique Prefecture, whereupon Bai Xiaochun produced the sword and prepared to free all the people therein. Rumbling sounds filled heaven and earth as blue light spilled out of the Greatsword of the North. The entire valley trembled as one figure after another emerged into the eternal immortal domains, confused expressions on their faces. Of course, neither the Grand Heaven Master nor the Giant Ghost King were familiar with any of these cultivators. But Bai Xiaochun had spent time in the north, and was essentially a household name there. Of course, these cultivators didn't know about how the Heavenspan realm was no more, and neither did they know anything about the enormous sovereign in the sky above. Therefore, they were all visibly confused and shaken. In the end, the Grand Heaven Master and Giant Ghost King were actually more skilled in allaying the confusion of the masses than Bai Xiaochun was. Therefore, they sent their divine sense out to explain the situation. Half a month later, everyone was out of the Great Sword of the North, and whether they found the situation easy to accept or not, had no choice but to begin their new lives in the eternal immortal domains. Actually, they were luckier than the rest of their fellow heavenspan cultivators, who had experienced the destruction of heaven and earth, and had been teleported out into strange lands to be lost, enslaved, or worse. The newly arrived cultivators had a long road in front of them, and the Grand Heaven Master did his best to inspire and motivate them to help in the development of Misty Sea Prefecture. Although not as many of them were adept at spirit enhancement as there would have been if they were wildlanders, there were still some. Furthermore, the Grand Heaven Master and Giant Ghost King were both connoisseurs of the art. And there was little need to mention Bai Xiaochun, who was the Heavenspan realm's only heavenly necromancer. All of that ensured that Misty Sea Prefecture would only continue to develop rapidly in the days to come. The prefecture flourished, and more merchants came to do business. Thanks to the promotional efforts of the Grand Heaven Master, people were already starting to call it by the moniker Prefecture of Spirit Enhancements. People in the know all over the eternal immortal domains were saying that Misty Sea Prefecture was the only place to get spirit enhancements. Although there were people from the Heavenspan realm in other locations who could perform spirit enhancements, the Grand Heaven Master convinced Bai Xiaochun to spread word that he was the ultimate enhancer in the eternal immortal domains. And who could compete with that? Once people began talking about the ultimate enhancer, it had a profound effect on Misty Sea Prefecture. It was virtually on a daily basis that people from the Heavenspan realm came to join them. As for Celestial Aged Spirit, he and Bai Xiaochun already had a tacit agreement. As far as Celestial Aged Spirit was concerned, as long as the profoundly troublesome Bai Xiaochun didn't interfere with his interests directly, then it wasn't worth it to offend him. And then there was the Saint Emperor. He could only sigh at the news of Misty Sea Prefecture's development. Although he could guess what Bai Xiaochun's ultimate plan was, in the end, it would benefit him as well. As such, there was little he could do. Perhaps if he wasn't aware of how much of a disaster Bai Xiaochun could be, he might have tried to interfere. But those days were long gone. Bai Xiaochun was a celestial, and could be profoundly dangerous. He was also the true master of the eternal turtle. The Saint Emperor could only imagine what would happen if he stopped Misty Sea Prefecture from progressing, and then Bai Xiaochun came to Saint Emperor City for any length of time. That was the final factor that made his decision. Let him do whatever he wants. And thus, Misty Sea Prefecture buzzed with activity. More and more people were talking about the Prefecture of Spirit Enhancements, even in the Vile Emperor dynasty. When Bai Xiaochun saw that nobody was coming to cause any trouble, he sighed with relief, and then focused more energy on the damaged fan. In one incredible run, he got all the way through the 29th level. After catching his breath, he excitedly stepped into the 30th level. However, it was in that exact moment that the spirit automaton, which had been asleep for months now, woke up again. "You shameless villain, I'm back. And this time, if I don't destroy you, I'll change my surname to match yours. I swear it." It was with narrowed eyes that the spirit automaton boy headed directly toward the 30th level. He was in the 30th level. Leaden clouds filled the sky, and endless mountains stretched out in all directions. Occasionally, certain mountains would rise high above the others, almost like smokestacks. In fact, the thick smoke that belched from those mountains made the entire world murky and gray. The smoke had a medicinal aroma to it, but the medicinal effects were varied and chaotic, almost toxic. Perhaps because of how that toxic gas filled the world, there wasn't any life visible. The lands were barren, and any plants which existed seemed to be withered and stunted because of the toxins. No birds could be seen flying in the sky, and countless skeletons of various creatures covered the mountains. The entire place seemed almost like a huge tomb. Bai Xiaochun was stunned, both by the toxic smoke, and also a strange, thumping sound. That sound is so familiar. What's this level about? There was indeed something very familiar about this place, and as for the toxins in the smoke, he remembered creating such elements himself on numerous occasions. However, this toxic smoke seemed much stronger than the type he had created in the past. After only being in the level for half an incense stick's worth of time, he felt as uncomfortable as if a sharp knife were slicing at his throat. And then he realized what the thumping sounds were: exploding pill furnaces. Heavens! I can't believe a place like this exists. Shivering, he jumped out of the way of a passing cloud of toxins, and then began searching for a way out of this wasteland. Because of how strange this level was, he was being even more careful than usual. Unfortunately, no amount of searching revealed an exit of any sort. Furthermore, his passage tended to kick up larger amounts of toxic smoke. On more than one occasion, he saw a mountain get covered with the stuff, and by the time the smoke cleared, all of the vegetation on the mountain had been melted. And that was only the beginning. As time progressed, Bai Xiaochun came to find that the effects of the smoke were unbelievably dramatic. For example, on one occasion, he saw a quaint little stream hid by the smoke, after which it turned pitch black, and began to emanate an aura of profound toxicity. On a few occasions when he wasn't paying close attention, he breathed in some of the smoke, which caused his guts to twist painfully. Face falling, he quickly ingested some antidotal medicinal pills to counteract the effects. Sadly, the rumbling sounds in his belly didn't go away, and he was forced to find a random cave. Sometime later he emerged, clearly physically weaker than before. Damn it, I can't believe there are laxative properties in that smoke too. I'm a celestial. I mastered the Undying Codex. How could I possibly be affected by this kind of stuff? He was now nervous about running into some toxic smoke that had the same properties as his aphrodisiac pills. The consequences of that happening were simply unimaginable. Damn it, I'm supposed to be the one giving pills to other people. This 30th level is really strange. I can't believe that it can actually hurt me. Shaken by how difficult this level was, he cautiously sent out some divine sense to try to get a better understand of the place. Before long, a strange expression could be seen on his face as he realized that there were tribes of living beings located in the mountains. The reason he called them tribes was because they wore crude, ancient-style clothing, much like the savage giants in Wildlands had worn. And yet, the creatures in these tribes could concoct medicinal pills. Even more unbelievable was that, although these living creatures resembled people, they were very small. They were imps, the largest among them only about the size of an average person's hand. Most of them were actually thumb-sized. Many of them, in the middle of their pill concocting, would suddenly jump up and dance with joy, seemingly crazed. They would also jabber in a way that he found impossible to understand. It was actually a somewhat familiar scene, and reminded him of himself when he passed certain critical points in concocting medicine. As for the streams of smoke, they were rising up from the tribes as a result of their pill concocting. When Bai Xiaochun noticed the expressions on the faces of the imps, he was shocked, but at the same time, understood everything. This world had once been a wonderful place, but it had been ruined by the imps' pill concocting. Countless living creatures had been killed by the toxic poison, and innumerable plants had been driven to extinction. Even the land and sky itself was withering because of it. Utterly terrifying, he murmured, blinking a few times. Considering how horrifying his own pill concocting often went, he actually felt quite a bit of respect for these imps. At the same time, now that he had found someone on a similar level as himself, he was almost itching to see if they were a match for him. Considering the types of problems that happened when he concocted pills, he had held back for a long time. But after catching a whiff of the toxic odor caused by the imp's concocting efforts, he suddenly felt like he couldn't control himself any longer. He really felt like he had to show these imp apothecaries how awesome he was. Wait, no, I have to control myself. After all, his goal was simply to get past this level, so having a competition with the imps would be pointless. Suppressing his impulses, he tried to think seriously about the level around him. Looking up at the toxic smoke, and then back down at the pill-concocting imps, he murmured, "Is the point of this level just to survive in hostile conditions?" Meanwhile, up in the air, the damaged fan's spirit automaton was there in the form of a boy, invisible and undetectable by Bai Xiaochun. Hands clasped behind his back, and looking very pleased with himself, he eyed Bai Xiaochun down below. The Dark Concocters caused a big headache for the exalted sovereign years ago. Their natural talents in pill concocting are unrivaled, and each and every one of them is completely obsessed with concocting pills. Worse, the medicinal pills they concoct are the type that no one under heaven would dare to eat. Even they won't consume their own pills. HMMMPHH. Back in the day, the sovereign would say that if the Dark Concocters were given the right circumstances and resources, they could destroy the entire starry sky. Although this place is only an illusion created with the power of the Tao essence of life and death, it's almost the same as if it were real. Unless this shameless cheater has the cultivation base of a sovereign, then he definitely won't last for long here. Normally speaking, the requirement is to stay in this land for 3 days. But I'll change the requirement from 3 days to 10,000. Alright, you rogue, if you manage to pass this level, I'll change my surname to match yours. I swear it. At this point, the boy couldn't help but laugh uproariously. This time, he was absolutely convinced that he would come out victorious. No one could last for long when dealing with the toxic smoke created by the Dark Concocters. And unless they were careful, one could die a horrifying death. Furthermore, because the entire place was bolstered by the Tao essence of life and death, the Dark Concocters could not be killed by means of the cultivation base. They could only be affected by medicinal toxins similar to their own. That was actually the only weakness to the level. One could theoretically pass the level by forcing all of the tribes that made up the Dark Concocters to surrender. If they all agreed to expel Bai Xiaochun, then according to the rules that governed the level, not even the spirit automaton could interfere. But that's impossible. The Dark Concocters have never surrendered to anyone. Even the sovereign of years past only managed to reach an agreement with them. They're not the type who will bow their heads. Having reached this point in his train of thought, the boy began to laugh even harder. He simply couldn't wait to see a look of true despair on Bai Xiaochun's face. In order to speed things along, the boy decided to help Bai Xiaochun by alerting the Dark Concocters to his presence. HMMMPHH. Tribulation is coming your way, you shameless cheater. Feeling very excited about what was to come, he performed an incantation gesture and pointed at the ground, causing invisible ripples to spread out through the world of the level. Almost immediately, the imps in the various Dark Concoctor tribes shivered and looked up. Despite the fact that Bai Xiaochun was hiding his cultivation base, they all suddenly looked in his direction and could see him clearly. Someone finally came. Countless Dark Concoctors poured out into the open, excited looks on their faces as they clamored at the tops of their lungs. He's mine. I need him to be a test tube for my medicine. Don't even think of trying to fight me for him. Get out of my way, all of you. This test tube belongs to my tribe. Don't run, test tube, we're coming for you. Some of the imps wielded wooden rods that they would normally use to mix medicines. Others rode atop vicious beasts who had blank eyes but moved with surprising quickness. A few of them even carried pill furnaces with them. Many of them had flamestones in hand. All looked particularly excited as they raced toward Bai Xiaochun. Apparently, now that they had ruined the world in which they lived, they were very excited to see a new test tube arrive. Furthermore, considering how large of a test tube he was, it meant that countless medicinal pills they had created over years of research could finally be properly tested. The imps couldn't keep from hooting and hollering in excitement. They were looking at Bai Xiaochun like a wolf looking at a beautiful woman, their eyes shining with passion, as if they wished to experiment with him and learn every little thing about him. They were even struggling with each other to be first among the crowd, to the point where fights were breaking out. It was really very dramatic. Before, heaven and earth had only been filled with the muffled boom of exploding pill furnaces and had been relatively peaceful and quiet. But now, the entire place was buzzing, filled with shouts and cries of all sorts. Bai Xiaochun looked around at the countless imps rushing out of the mountains like mice. Most of them were so smudged with dark soot from the exploding pill furnaces that they were pitch black. After a moment, their shouts and cries brought Bai Xiaochun back to his senses. Test tube? At first he thought perhaps he had heard wrong, but after hearing the same thing a few times in a row, he started to get angry. They're calling me their test tube? Damn it, you people are the test tubes. Everyone in your clan is a test tube. Most people wouldn't get so angry at being called something like that, but Bai Xiaochun was a grandmaster in the Tao of medicine, and had performed countless tests on animals. It would be like if a pig butcher faced a mob who said that he was a pig that needed to be butchered. It was a level of insult that caused his hair to stand on end. Even as Bai Xiaochun began to devolve into a rage, the incoming imps smiled, revealing yellowish teeth. At the same time, they began to pull out medicinal pills to throw at him. Hey, test tube, why don't you try this pill? It's been passed down for 9 generations in my family. It's called a yin-yang retroversion pill. Don't even think of trying to steal what's mine, you. Come over here, test tube. Try my pill. I just perfected the formula recently. It's called a burping pill. After you consume it, your burps will smell like food you ate last year. Get the hell out of my way. It took me 100 years to successfully concoct this 9 lives reincarnation pill. Although none of the imps seemed to get along, they were all pulling out medicinal pills and throwing them at Bai Xiaochun. Clearly, it was a skill they possessed, and they had experience doing this sort of thing. Because of that, the medicinal pills would explode before they actually reached Bai Xiaochun, creating a toxic cloud that threatened to envelop him. Shivering, Bai Xiaochun backed up. And yet, before he could even move, another wave of medicinal pills shot in his direction. Booms rang out left and right, forcing Bai Xiaochun to dodge as quickly as he could. Unfortunately, there were a lot of imps, and thus, a lot of medicinal pills. Within only a few breaths worth of time, the entire area was covered with a powerful cloud of medicinal powder that was virtually impossible to escape. Some of the imps were too slow, and couldn't get close enough to throw pills. When they saw that Bai Xiaochun was just about to be overwhelmed by the medicinal pills, they started to get very nervous. Hold on, test tube. Try my medicinal pill. Damn it, take mine too. The multicolored cloud was quite a shocking sight to behold. As for Bai Xiaochun, he was in a very tight spot, and was just about to make his escape, when the cloud caught him and rolled over him. But that wasn't all. Many of the imps were intent on capturing him alive, and were therefore a bit nervous about how things were playing out. You people are outrageous. Just when we got this great new test tube, you're going to go and kill him. Hold on. If we can't catch him alive, we should at least try out this pill I've been working on for my entire life. It's called a resurrection pill. Hang in there, test tube. Try out my integrated super tonic pill. That should keep you going for at least an incense stick's worth of time. And thus, even more medicinal pills shot forth and exploded. The imps looked at the shocking cloud, eyes burning with anticipation and passion. They truly wanted to see what would happen when Bai Xiaochun absorbed the medicines they had researched and created, and if there were any unexpected developments. They were so excited that they began to argue amongst themselves. Do you know how hard it is to come across new test tubes? This might be the last one. I just hope that before this test tube dies, he can inhale some of my medicinal smoke. It's all your fault, people. How embarrassing for us Dark Concocters. Have you never seen a test tube before or something? As the imps argued, the boy that was the spirit automaton gasped and backed up a bit. Although he didn't need to fear the medicinal smoke, it was so terrifying that even he felt chills. The sovereign was right. The Dark Concocters really are horrifying. Give them the right circumstances and resources, and they could definitely destroy the entire starry sky. They should make short work of that shameless bastard. With that, the boy excitedly looked on to see what happened to Bai Xiaochun. Even just imagining what was to come was quite pleasurable to him. The Dark Concocters likewise all craned their necks, causing countless gazes to fall on the roiling smoke. It was at this point that, all of a sudden, a boom rang out as smoke erupted out in all directions. At the same time, Bai Xiaochun shot out from inside, his hair disheveled, his face smudged with black patches. His face was a mixture of red, pink, and yellow colors, almost as if he had been dyed. He really didn't look to be in good shape at all. In addition to fleeing, he was sneezing loudly. Even more exaggerated was the noxious stench which spread out in all directions, and the fact that tears were streaming down his cheeks. Then he opened his mouth as if to shout, only to spit out a ball of fire. He was itching everywhere, especially in his private parts, enraging him to the point where he was nearly senseless. All of these were things that he had never experienced before in life. Worst of all was that a multitude of marks had appeared on his face. There was a tortoise, a bird, a dog, a tree leaf, and many others. Some even looked like pill furnaces. Some were even repeats of other marks. That's my mark. Ha ha ha. The test tube got one of my medicinal pills. I'm definitely the newest patriarch mystery pill. Hey, my mark is there too. See that little tortoise? This is awesome. Damn it, why isn't my mark there? Why? I threw out over 100 pills. Don't even try to compete with me. I'm definitely the Dark Concocters' new patriarch mystery pill. Of course, the Dark Concocters had long since reached a point in the Tao of medicine where they could cause personal marks to appear on people who had consumed their medicinal pills. Thus, those who didn't see any marks were beating their chests and stamping their feet in lamentation. Bai Xiaochun was feeling all sorts of strange sensations, from tickling to torment. And then he heard the things the imps were saying, and his eyes turned crimson. Unheard of levels of rage began to course through him as he descended into madness. He was the one who used medicinal pills to deal with people. Now, for the first time, he was being harmed by the effects of unusual medicinal pills. It was a feeling that had him hovering on the verge of insanity. Plus, as a grandmaster of the Tao of medicine, the vicious banter and ridicule of the imps was even more humiliating. Complete and utter bullying. Damn it, you people are forcing my hand. Let me tell you, when I get pissed off, I frighten even myself. I'll show you who's the true patriarch mystery pill. Slapping his bag of holding, he produced a handful of medicinal pills. Thus, this episode comes to an end. Remember to like and comment so we can discuss the story together. Until we meet again in the next chapters.